Hey guys, Sean here and welcome to the F1 Word. So at the 2025 Monaco Grand Prix, we had a brand new track-specific rule that dictated every driver must make 2 pit stops during the race on Sunday. On the off chance you missed it, it was brought in as a way to try and make the race around the famous street somewhat more entertaining or interesting, as well as to prevent the scenes from 2024 where all but a handful of drivers didn't make a single pit stop as they were able to change tyres under the first lap red flag. The big question is though, did it work and should it be used again next season? Before I give you my thoughts though, what actually ended up happening was teams like Williams and Racing Bulls, for example, were able to use one of their drivers to back up the pack to enable the other one to make their 2 pit stops and then swap their drivers around and do the same again for the other driver. Okay, at the front of the field, the change allowed Max Verstappen to lead for a while, and actually had we had a late red flag, he could have won it, so there is that, but we didn't get a late red flag, and so he obviously didn't win it. And when you dig into it, the mandatory 2-stop didn't really change anything at the sharp end apart from drivers making an extra stop. It's certainly not gone down well with drivers and some pundits as well. Max Verstappen saying he was glad F1 tried something, but it didn't really work. Carlos Sainz agreed and told media post-race that it backfired in the midfield and said he was disappointed, adding, quote, "People are going to manipulate the final result with their driving," which is somewhat ironic given that his team were one of the biggest culprits, but I get what he's saying. And Alex Albon actually apologised to everyone who watched. Martin Brundle said during commentary that he wasn't liking it before going on to add, and again I will quote him here, "This is about excellence, this is about the highest point of motorsport, and I don't like to see so many drivers going slowly," and even said post-race that it was too chaotic and the focus was on pitting and not racing, where we should really be focusing. And Jenson Button felt the tactics deployed on track made a mockery of things and that drivers pacing so slowly actually all looked very silly. Despite the apparent backlash, maybe that's a bit extreme to be fair, but certainly a lack of enthusiasm from most drivers, PlanetF1.com understands there is a feeling within Formula One that the rule change did its job of creating something different with an appetite for it continuing. I really wish someone would tell F1 that something different doesn't always mean something good. But anyway, I mean, you can read all the reaction for yourselves, can't you? You're here for my opinion, right? So what do I think? Well, firstly, I need to cover this off. I know I came into this weekend with a very sceptical outlook about the whole idea, so maybe some of you might feel I was always going to be on a bit of a downer about it all. But in my defence, I promised I would go into it with an open mind, which I did, and I hoped as well that it would all work out really well for Formula One. And I have to say, it did keep me engaged because we had to keep an eye on who was going to be doing what in terms of pit stops and all of that business. And alright, it may well have been the case that because I was doing a watch along at the time, that helped me through it too. It may have been a bit different if I'd not been live and was watching from the sofa, so that's something to take into account too. But ultimately, whilst I'll admit I enjoy having some data to keep an eye on whilst watching the racing, as Martin Brundle said, I want to watch racing and not just sit staring at timing and trying to work out who has stopped, who hasn't, and what speed a driver is doing to catch the back of the pack before getting stuck there. I get it, racing in Monaco is not easy, we know that, but I still want to be focused on that and not the numbers alone. It also felt it was a case of the backing up people problem, as it's been described, was being shuffled into the midfield rather than being at the front of the grid. So it didn't really work for me in that sense either. And don't forget, up to and including 9th place Albon were at least 2 laps down on the leaders. That is how slow they were driving through that race. It all felt very contrived and certainly didn't feel like a race to me. Drivers cruising around in the middle of the track, deliberately holding each other up with, at times, some borderline blocking and braking wasn't all that thrilling to me. At least in a normal Monaco weekend, they pick up the pace a bit around the pit stops and that's far more interesting than backing others into traffic. Again, in my opinion at least. You may differ, many of you I'm sure will. And as I've already touched on, it didn't actually change anything in the top 10 anyway. Okay, sure, the order changed, but not as a result of the mandatory 2-stop strategy. The top 4 finished as they started. Lewis Hamilton undercut those ahead to make his way back into the top 5 where he would have been without his qualifying impeding penalty anyway, and as he would have done in a standard 1-stopper because of the Ferrari's pace advantage over the likes of the Racing Bulls and Haas cars. And Alonso's mechanical DNF then moved everyone else up a place too, so the new rule change did nothing. Well, apart from some absurd driving in the midfield at times. I mean, we had George Russell cutting the chicane to overtake Alex Albon, then claiming he was trying to avoid him before deciding to push on and take the penalty, which he thought was going to be a time penalty, but ended up being a drive-through, which, by the way, should have been a massive penalty to his race. But Antonelli backed the pack up to allow Russell to serve his penalty and make 2 further pit stops without losing a place. That, for me, just is not racing and doesn't make for an exciting race at all. Again, the word of the race for me has to be contrived, because that is exactly what it felt like whilst I was watching. Even when the likes of, for example, Ollie Bearman did take a gamble with the timing of his pit stops, he would rejoin in clear air, drive 3, 4, 5, 6 seconds a lap quicker than those ahead, and just when you'd think, hang on a second, Bearman may have played a blinder here, he catches the slow pack, can't get past those ahead, and so can't use any pace advantage he may have had and gets stuck. Utterly pointless. Don't get me wrong, I was pleased to see F1 try something, and if the aim was to make the race more interesting than the 2024 event, then it succeeded, but that's not exactly a high bar to clear, is it? And I should clarify that by saying that it succeeded, I mean in the sense that something was happening, which was ultimately the aim. From a purely sporting perspective, racing first, maybe it wasn't better because, as someone pointed out to me post-stream on Sunday, at least 2024 was organic rather than contrived. But from an entertainment perspective, which I'm sure some of you will be screaming, that's what it's supposed to be, Sean, then it was an improvement. I suppose that's the point when it comes to opinion on this, isn't it? It depends on what you want from Formula One. If you want pure racing, then firstly, I hate to tell you this, that ship sailed a long time ago. But if you want whatever pure racing is considered to be these days, then you're probably going to hate it. But if you want chaos, contrived drama, and lots of pit stops, then you will probably have loved it. But this rule did not work for me, and it won't work in its current form if F1 does decide to push ahead with this again, which, let's face it, given their lack of interest in listening to what people have to say, they probably will. There is an argument to be made that a lack of a safety car removed the option for someone to roll the dice and try something different, and that might have made things a little bit more interesting. And maybe, lots of mights and maybes in this, by the way, but maybe the rules just need a bit of a tweak rather than binning off altogether. So, for example, as Carlos Sainz suggested in his post-race comments, we might have to have some rules in place that prevent the pace and result manipulation we saw, and maybe we need to lower the threshold as well for what constitutes dangerous driving or driving unnecessarily slowly in the regulations, for Monaco specifically, of course. That's up to them to debate and make a call on, though. All I can do is offer you my opinion, but I don't like it. I think I've made that perfectly clear, and I really would get rid of it and go back to the drawing board with this one. But remember, whether it's mandatory 2 stoppers, set stint lengths, softer tyres, banana skins, blasting Westlife songs into the cockpit, whatever they want to try, that'd be terrible, but anyway, overtaking at Monaco is near impossible with these cars, and so there will always be an element of pace manipulation and management to make strategy work. So the racing is always going to suffer to a point around Monte Carlo. If FOM and the FIA are so desperate for the racing to be better around Monaco, then rather than adding these gimmicks, they need to work on making these cars significantly smaller and easier to race. That is, aside from dropping the track altogether, the only definitive answer. But with safety rightly paramount and the steps the series has taken technologically, that is not going to happen. And no, before you ask, I don't think next year's relatively minor size tweak is going to make much of a difference at all. It is also worth noting, though, so you don't think this is all rose-tinted spectacles or whatever, even when the cars were much, much smaller than they are today, the races were still a bit flat at times and overtaking was still far from easy at Monaco. Easier, yes, but not easy. And I'll leave you with this. This feels quite ranty for a change. I don't know if it's coming across that way. It's not meant to be, but here we are. I will leave you with this. Monaco can and often is a bit of a dull race. I know, spoiler alert. But we have had good races in the past and in recent years. Okay, more recently helped by some rain. And it's not like Monaco is the only race on the calendar that can throw up F1's equivalent to football's 0-0 bore draws. As I'm sure many of you will argue, though, Monaco almost guarantees it every season, and that's really the issue for a lot of people. But look, those are just a few of my post-weekend thoughts on it all, and we can discuss everything a bit more in the streams over the Spanish Grand Prix weekend once we've had time to digest it all properly. But what did you make of the mandatory 2-stopper in Monaco, and what, if anything, would you do to try and help F1 in its constant desperation to try and spice things up around Monte Carlo? You can let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Now, I will be back on Thursday with the Spanish Grand Prix preview. There will be some shorts out between now and then too. And don't forget to join me live for qualifying and the race across the weekend for, hopefully, an absolute thriller in Barcelona. In the meantime, though, if you did enjoy this one, then please do leave a like, as it does help the channel and its never-ending fight with the YouTube algorithm. And consider subscribing as well so you don't miss any future videos or streams. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.